Welcome back, everybody, to the Tailgate Podcast. I am your host, Michael Quattromani, as you know, the voice of the Tailgate. And today, in back-to-back weeks, I've got another special guest, this time the creator of the myfantasyguy TikTok, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm really excited to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's football. I mean, how could you not, how could you not want to talk about football? But without any more dilly-dally, let's just get right into it. So, first of all, fantasy football is kind of coming to a close, really getting into the dog days and getting into the playoffs. And for the most part, we're just going to cover players' expectations versus how they actually performed in the season from, just the draft day, what they're projected to do this season and how they really panned out. That's going to be the first segment. And then second up, we're going to have a new segment I've never had in the podcast before. It is going to be, where would you draft them next year? So I have four guys that I'm going to ask Ryan of where he would like to draft these players next season, and he'll give his takes. And then lastly, what is your AFC/NFC championship prediction? What teams do you have in both of the conferences? And then who are you going to have in the Super Bowl? So let's just jump right into it. First segment, playoff performances versus expectations. First guy we're going to talk about is going to be DK Metcalf. So Metcalf came into the season, obviously, looking to be second fiddle to Tyler Lockett. What are your thoughts on him?
So I'm not going to puff out my chest that much, but I expected Metcalf to overtake Lockett. Mm-hmm. And admittedly, from an Eagles fan's perspective, just seeing Metcalf in that playoff game, I think he went like 10 for 140 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
We knew how gifted he was. Pair him with Russell Wilson, and the Seahawks legitimately did let Russ cook. And I think that is equally important in terms of Metcalf's skill set and just the offense in general and his rapport with Wilson.
I completely agree. Again, I'm not going to puff up my chest either, but like last season, down the stretch, kind of like a year ago today almost, you just have to look at it from a talent standpoint. I mean, DK Metcalf blows Tyler Lockett out of the water. And when you have such a skilled quarterback like Russell Wilson, you have to expect him to take over at some point.
Yeah. So it's no knock to Lockett. Too.
I was just going to say, it's not knock at all.
Yeah. I think he's been incredible also, but yeah. This was one of the more foreseeable breakouts, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to group right into the next segment. Where would you draft Tyler Lockett next season?
Off the top of my head, I would say probably the 4th or 5th round. He's going to be a guy that's probably not going to end up on a lot of my teams. I just can't take the inconsistency. It would require me getting a true wide receiver one that's going to give me 15 to 20 a week. So yeah, I'd say I think 4th, 5th round late, but yeah.
That's definitely fair. I mean,
maybe I'm not bullish enough on him. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, look, earlier in the season, though, I think he had like anywhere between 17 and 21 for like all 4 weeks. He was looking awesome. And then obviously he had like 13 and then 5 and then 42 randomly. I mean, he's been kind of all over the place over the last month, but yeah, I can probably get on board with 4th, 5th round. I'd probably lean a little bit more towards 4th, maybe even 3rd round, because I think that by, next year he will be a wide receiver one. I mean, we'll have to see though. Obviously things can change, but the second guy that we're going to talk about is a guy who really got hyped up mostly over the draft. Clyde EdwardsHelaire, drafted really, I'd say late in first rounds, very early in second rounds in most of my drafts. What do you think about him?
So the obvious narrative with Clyde was that he's going to be the RB1 in the Chiefs offense. And that was what you were paying for when you took him as a first round pick. And I was buying into that for the most part, I would say, but it's kind of bizarre. There's really no reason as to why he hasn't been that good. Even when they bring in LeVeon, he's not even chipping away. Clyde's still the clear one. Mm-hmm. And he is the one. He's not really in a committee. Darrell Williams will get a couple catches every game, but I think it's just that Mahomes is dropping back so much and he doesn't check it down. So he's a touchdown dependent running back in my eyes. But yeah, the sky's the limit next year. We'll see how they integrate him into the offense.
Yeah, I agree. It's crazy because you think about over the offseason, everybody that was talking about, Andy Reid's offense, you think of like LaShawn McCoy, Kareem Hunt, these guys who just excel in his offense, a fantastic offensive line, high-powered offense. You think Chiefs are going to be blowing out teams. They're going to be running it a lot in the second half. EdwardsHelaire is going to feed. And then he he hasn't been bad. Like, he's been a solid RB2, but obviously, like you said earlier, perfectly, like, you didn't draft him to be an RB2. You draft him to be your bell cow number one guy who's going to get you 15 to 25 points a week. He just hasn't been that. So again, we will have to see what he does next year, but I mean, I will admit I swung and missed on LeVeon Bell. I thought Bell was going to be an RB2. He hasn't. He's a borderline bench player, if that.
After the
Yeah.
trade, you were buying him when he got traded to the Chiefs, or when he was on the Jets just at draft day?
No, when we went to the Chiefs, he was actually a free agent in my league because someone got fed up about the injuries and him just not performing well. So
Wow.
I picked him up and he didn't do anything.
I
But
don't blame you.
yeah, I mean, you'd think though, he goes from, I mean, my whole perspective was, on the Steelers, he was the RB1 every year. It's Le'Veon Bell, and then he goes to the Jets, performs not great, and then you'd think, oh, he's back in a high-powered offense, he's going to perform great, and he's still living in Clyde Edwards-Helaire's shadow. So it's just one of those things. But the third and final player that we're going to talk about today is going to be Calvin Ridley.
So I have a lot of shares of Ridley actually, and I was killing it after week 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's dropping 30 a week, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and I legitimately did not think that he was a sell high candidate. Obviously, I was wrong. Who knows how healthy he's going to be? It's just watching him play. I'm just always scared he's gonna I don't know, break his ankle.
Yeah.
But immensely talented. I think we're seeing from an NFL standpoint, the Roddy White to Julio transition is effectively going to be the Julio to Ridley transition that we're seeing now.
Yeah, I love that take.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, again, I really saw the Calvin Ridley breakout. How could you not? I mean, he's so talented. Like, I personally, I thought that he was going to play great. He has, and he doesn't have a week less than 14 when he's been fully healthy. I mean, he had like 7 in the first corner versus Carolina when he got injured, but for all intents and purposes, he doesn't have a game less than 14. And in my eyes, I don't sell him. I think he's a wide receiver 1. I got lucky. I had him and Metcalf in one of my leagues, so I've been riding that nicely. But look, I don't see the problem with Calvin Ridley. I think that he's obviously exceeded expectations compared to, I think he was drafted in the 5th or 6th round in some leagues. He was drafted as a flex guy, I'm pretty sure.
39, 40.
Yeah. And look, he's borderline wide receiver 1 in maybe 10 or 12 person league. So I think that Calvin Ridley is playing amazing right now. And so, all right, so for the second segment, where would you draft them next year? So these players, most of them have kind of gone under wraps maybe in the draft, or, were hyped up, didn't pan out. Where'd you go next year? And then we have one guy who is just absolutely insane, but we'll save him for last. So first up, a guy who I really want your opinion on. It's going to be DeAndre Swift, running back for the Lions.
So a good buddy of mine, at the beginning of the season, and I'm tipping my hat, Jared, if you watch this, he said that DeAndre Swift is going to be the next Alvin Kamara. And I think that's pretty on point. So obviously at the beginning of the season, it looked like it was going to be a whiff, but with rookie running backs in fantasy, you have to invest in their future, whether that's week 11, 10, I forget when he broke out, or whether that's 3 years from now, if you're in a dynasty league or something. But I think the case with Swift is once he got the opportunity, the volume, he took off. And I think that's just a testament to how good he is. He can be the feature back, even in a Lions offense that is likely playing from behind in a lot of games, but high floor with the receiving ability. I love Swift. If I had to give a round for next year, that's tough. Dynasty leagues, well, you don't draft rookies. That's wrong. You only draft rookies. But I would say mid-third round.
Mid-third round?
What do you think, Michael?
So I had a hot take. My other podcast, if you go follow the 4-1 podcast, go check that out. I have him in the second round. It may be a little too high, but so I've thought about it this way. Matt Patricia, I'm a Patriots fan. Not too mad that he left. He hasn't really panned out as a head coach. I don't think he's going to be a start. I don't think he's going to be the coach next season. I think they're going to can him, for once and for all. They're going to get rid of him eventually. And I think he's the reason why DeAndre Swift is kind of being held back, because he's really trying to enforce the committee idea of like Kerryon Johnson, Adrian Peterson, and DeAndre Swift in that offense. But Peterson might retire after this year. And if Patricia's gone, then whoever comes in is probably going to say to themselves, like, oh, we have a real star in DeAndre Swift. So I think they're going to make him the bell cow. And I think Swift's going to be an absolute beast because at first when you said I wasn't necessarily on board with the Alvin Kamara comparison in a way, but he's a receiving running back. And, I don't necessarily disagree with it in years to come. So that's why I have him as in the second round. But, that could change seeing how the rest of the season plays out. So,
yes, I totally could see that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So next up, we have Jonathan Taylor. Taylor, running back for the Indianapolis Colts. Right now, he is the running back 16. Earlier in the season, he was looking like the real deal. And then the bye hit. So what are your thoughts?
To be honest, that's higher than I thought he was. I didn't think he was 16.
Yeah.
I guess he looked great against the Packers. I think for the short term, let's see if he can reproduce that. Mm-hmm. Everyone was hammering home that narrative that Jonathan Taylor has a great playoff schedule, rest of the season schedule.
Yeah.
You should buy. Marlon Mack goes down. Obviously, he's the feature back. In terms of where I think he's going to fall next year, I think probably 3rd to 4th round, which, to be honest, is where he was roughly drafted this year. But I think that was baked into that draft price was the fact that he would eventually overtake the job from Marlon Mack. Mm-hmm. Granted, we didn't expect it would be from injury. But yeah, behind arguably one of the best run blocking O-lines in football, it's kind of bizarre why he can't get it done. But I don't know. Jonathan Taylor is a tough guy to predict.
He definitely is. So after, I don't know why I remember this, but after Jordan Wilkins had the 20 carry game, mm-hmm. That's when I was just at like, you know what? He's one of those guys you cannot predict. Like, I just don't get it. I don't get it with that offense. Hines has been more involved in past weeks than last week. I remember I was facing him. He had like -0.2 going into the half. Like, I just don't, that running back core is so hard to predict. And you'd have to assume that like Jonathan Taylor is the most talented running back. So he's going to emerge as the front runner. But then again, I mean, Frank Reich has put in, again, Jordan Wilkins for 20 carries randomly. So, I mean, it's so hard to predict. But yeah, I don't know where I would.
I think what we're seeing, and I would have to look more into this, but I'm assuming that teams are stacking the box and forcing Rivers to beat them. I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, that's what you'd think, because it's not a bad idea to force Phillip Rivers at the age of 39 to go and beat you. But yeah, I could definitely get on board with that. Honestly, though, yes. I'm a little bit lower on Taylor. Depending on what he does for the rest of the season, it's subject to change. But as of right now, I would not draft Taylor until at least the late 5th, maybe early 6th round, in my opinion. I don't see it right now, especially if Mack is back next year. Then you have 4 running backs in that backfield. It's going to be really hard to gauge. So I'm waiting till the 6th. But, look, you have to assume that offensive line is going to be able to hold him up, and he's going to be a viable running back for years to come. So 3rd on the list, another running back, 3 straight, and actually another rookie. We have Antonio Gibson, surprisingly the number 11 running back in the league this year. Again, he had a ton of hype. It seemed late in, I'd say August, he had like a ton of hype. He was a wide receiver, turned into a running back. He's going to be a PPR machine, all that good stuff. And what are your thoughts on him?
I'm really high on Gibson, and a lot of things. Number 1, I think he passes the eye test. He looks good. He's good at football. I could definitely see that. Number 2, look at what Ron Rivera did with Christian McCaffrey. And it's somewhat of an immature stance for me to say that just because it's so obvious, but that transition seems to be what's happening here. Granted, J.D. McKissick is also a guy I'm pretty high on for the short term. But it looks like that the way that they're using Gibson, he's a red zone threat. He catches passes. He could go off for 100 yards in any game. I think he's going to be the workhorse again next year. And I'm betting on this Washington offense to be okay. I trust Rivera. So if I had to give a round, I'm being lame here, but I'm also taking him probably early 4th round.
I can see that. I can definitely see early 4th round for him. Definitely. It's kind of, for me, it's in the same boat as like Terry McLaurin. It's like McLaurin's great. I think that he's quarterback proof. He doesn't really need a good one to be a good receiver. Obviously, if he had a good one, like I've said 100 times, but if you put him in the Colts offense, I think he's so much better. Because it's just a better offense. But yeah, I will admit though, I do think Gibson's going to be a hard guy to gauge over the offseason though, because the Washington offense is so unpredictable. I agree with you. It's hard to deny the talent. He has, like you said, passed the eye check. I completely agree. I just think it's going to be really hard to gauge over the offseason of how he's going to do. But if Washington goes out and they draft either like probably not Trevor Lawrence, but like a Trey Lyles or, even like a Justin Fields that they want to trade up, then I could definitely see that happening. But I'm a little bit lower on Gibson, though. I would still say 4th round, though. I think there's a little bit more worry about him in my eyes, though, if I'm being honest. So The last guy, though, pretty obvious, Travis Kelce. He is the number 1 tight end in the league this year, obviously, by a considerable margin. He's drafted, I think, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was around the 2nd or 3rd round last year. Where are you taking him this year?
Yeah. So his ADP was right around 18, I think. You're right. And I was making my rest of season tight end video, and I'm realizing that, okay, there's Kelce's obviously number 1, probably Waller 2, probably Andrews 3, maybe Hawkinson, and then it's just nothing. And I think what we have to realize is that the tight end position is always going to be deep at the beginning of the year. You have your Eric Ebrons, he's a bad example, but your Tyler Higbees, your Mike Gesicki's, your Noah Fants that everyone's really high on. They're going to wait on tight end.
Hayden Hurst too.
Hayden Hurst, although he's been pretty solid up until last. But and then slowly as guys get injured, guys don't pan out, the tight end position just becomes paper thin. So because of that, I'm changing my draft strategy next year, but only for Travis Kelce, strictly Kelce. I think it's wrong to say that he didn't merit a 1st round draft pick this year. He's arguably the most valuable guy in fantasy football right now. He puts up like 23 a week. Like, it's just incredible, the advantage you can have on your team. So I don't see much changing next year. I think he's in his late 20s, early 30s. I don't see him falling off. I don't see Mahomes going anywhere. So there's no reason for me to not take him late 1st round, early 2nd round, right around that turn. I would love if I can get, I don't know, like a Miles Sanders or someone in that crop, and then go Kelce, and then try and hit on one of these 4th to 5th round receivers, the AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley. So then go from there.
Yeah, I do really like that take, because I think Kelce is so deserving of a 1st round pick. And in my eyes, I think it's been a while since we've drafted a tight end in the 1st round, probably since like a Jimmy Graham on the Saints or like a Gronk. But yeah, I mean, he puts up big games, and the only game he has, it was like 7 against New England or 8 against New England. But that's because New England just shuts down your best player on every team. So I mean, that's tough, but he's unreal. Even in like tough weather games, he catches 2 touchdowns in Buffalo on a downpour night. It's just, he's unreal. I think he's definitely deserving of a 1st round pick in my eyes, because he's just one of those guys where you can pencil him for 15 and 20 at, like you said, a position that you can't really pencil in a whole lot of tight ends for 15 to 20, maybe not even 10 for some guys. So I definitely agree with you there. It's such a hit or miss position. I would say the only other guy that I don't think you can really miss on is Darren Waller. I'm close to putting TJ Hawkinson in that conversation, because he's definitely a young tight end that's trending up. But again, it's such a tough thing, and in my eyes, it's a crowded offense, because you got Stafford obviously, and then you got Swift and Kerryon Johnson, Adrian Peterson, Kenny Golladay, Danny Amendola, even Marvin Jones. Like, it's kind of crowded for me, but Hawkinson still makes his name known in that offense. So I think he's a guy you could look at next year in drafts, but it's hard to disagree with Kelce being a 1st round pick.
Absolutely. If I might, I just want to plug something. Just from me being in my leagues, Kelce, I believe, has Atlanta and New Orleans in weeks 15 and 16, which is just like, it's a field day. Enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. So with that, we are going to move to the final segment. It is going to be the AFC and NFC championship predictions. So I'm going to toss it off to you first. What is your AFC championship prediction? What are the 2 teams you got?
I have a strange feeling, just, I don't know, gut, that we might end up with the same 2 teams. I don't know why, but so I'm chalking it, and to me, there's no reason not to. And I think that there's validity behind that. I'm going with the Chiefs and the Steelers, and I'll talk for just a minute on both teams. The Chiefs are the Chiefs, and obviously the main difference I see between this team and the Super Bowl team is the defense. Usually, I Steve Spagnuolo, I trust him to get things right as the season progresses. But I think at this rate, if you're giving up 30 plus points to the Raiders, there's a little cause for concern. But at the same time, another year of a mature Mahomes who, game on the line, give him over a minute on the clock, evidenced by last week, you're going to win the game.
Mhm.
So not a ton else I could say there. In terms of the Steelers, I'm really excited to see this matchup because if I think there's any team in football that could possibly neutralize the Chiefs offense, it's the Steelers. And the game in particular that I think is a good example to show that is against the Titans earlier this year. Dominated time of possession, ran the football, played elite defense. Obviously, the Titans came back later on, but I don't know. The Steelers have just such a dominant grasp over the game that, and Big Ben's playing out of his mind. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
I feel like for some reason, and I don't think it's very fitting, but for some reason, the word that's always associated with the Steelers right now is overrated. Do you think they are an overrated team?
No.
I don't think so either. I completely agree. They're 10-0. And I think it's really hard for you to say that they are an overrated football team because, they beat the Ravens decisively. They beat the Titans, and look, I don't think they're good, but they completely obliterated the Browns. So I think you got to stop saying that the Steelers are an overrated team. But yes, I do agree. I think it will be the Steelers and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. It's a very boring answer, and I am one of those people who I love making hot takes. Like, I love putting, analysis behind it, obviously, but I hate going with the boring answer. But just to put some stats behind it, I think that the Chiefs and Steelers are tier 1, and then everybody else in the AFC is like tier 3. Like, I don't even think there's a tier 2. I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the rest of the AFC. But Pittsburgh is number 1 in overall defense, number 4 in overall offense. And and Kansas City is number 1 in overall offense and then number 7 in overall defense. I don't see either of these teams not making the AFC Championship, so I think they're both going to represent. Who is your take for the NFC Championship?
So this takes a lot of thinking, and I could see 4, maybe 5 answers here.
I could
But
too, yeah.
if I had to decide, I'm going with the Saints and the Packers. Is that what you're going to go with?
I'm not. No, I'm not. Oh. I'm not going with Saints and Packers now.
Okay. All right. So I'll do a little explaining. The Saints pass rush has been unbelievable as of late. And really get it. Drew Brees has like 85 cracked ribs. So who knows what his situation is going to be. But if they can ride out this defense, if they can run the football with Alvin Kamara, looks like Michael Thomas is giving them a boost. I think Sean Payton has enough creativity in him to get this team to the playoffs. And I think the elephant in the room here, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about this, is what we're really deciding here is why not the Seahawks? Why not the Rams? And I think that the Saints as a complete football team just have less flaws. So that's why I'm going with them. And then the Packers, I'm betting on Aaron Rodgers. I really am. And I'm a little cautious to fall victim to any recency bias from the last game against the Colts. But I don't know if there's necessarily a team in the NFC that can play the defense can play defense at the same level as the Colts. So yeah, simple there.
Okay. So actually we do have one team in common. I have the Saints also representing the NFC in the championship. They look fantastic, even without Drew Brees in the lineup. I think, like you said earlier, they have a very underrated defense. They're 8th overall in points per game, and their offense is 5th overall in offensive points per game. Michael Thomas, like you said, I mean, we're really just bouncing off each other right now. Officially back, putting up a 100-yard game, and I don't see too many teams that are going to get in the way of the Saints making the championship. They have the tools to be a Super Bowl contender. They have a great coach in Sean Payton, great offensive line, great quarterback, and they have a formidable defense. Where we disagree though is I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers representing the NFC. Yeah, so it's funny you say the Packers because I am probably the biggest Packers hater in the world. It's not that I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I think that he's a jerk, if I'm being honest. But I think they're fool's gold. They remind me, I'm a Patriots fan. They remind me a lot of the Patriots last year. It seems like they beat up on the really bad teams and then they lose to the good ones. So, I mean, they completely got obliterated by the Bucs, 38-10. They lose to the Colts, who I don't really think are that good, but they lose to the Colts, and then they randomly lose to the Vikings. It's just those games just confuse me a lot. I think they're a very top-heavy team. I think when you take obviously not gonna take away, but besides Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Jones, there's not really another guy on that team that's like that really comes to mind for me at least. I mean, obviously Zadarius Smith is great. Jaire Alexander's having maybe a defensive player of the year season, borderline. I'm not sure. But I just don't think they have what it takes to make the NFC Championship in my eyes. The only reason I have the Bucks, I've had them there since the summer. Since Tom Brady joined them, I've just been saying Bucks are making the Super Bowl. They're making the Super Bowl. I'm a firm believer in it. Obviously, it's probably creating a lot of controversy, but I just don't see a team that is going to be able to beat them in the playoffs. I think that the only problem I see with them is honestly the coaching. I think that Bruce Arians is way too stubborn, and Tom Brady has a huge ego. So I think both of them just need to find some sort of common ground with the playbook and what plays they're going to run. Because I'm watching that Rams game versus the Bucks, and I'm pretty sure one of the stats was like Brady was 1 for 8 over passes of over 15 yards. That's awful. Yeah. But Brady has never been, even when he was 28 winning the Super Bowls, he's never been a deep ball thrower. So I think, you have a guy like Chris Godwin, who's your short slant guy. Antonio Brown is a possession receiver. He's your short slant guy. And then Mike Evans is your Randy Moss. Like, you don't need to have all three of those guys running, verticals all the time. You can have them running slant plays. And I think that's really common ground they need to find in that offense with the Bucks. So for me, it's just really hard to doubt Tom Brady with a lethal offense. So in a formidable defense too. The Bucks defense is 10th in opponents' points per game, and most of that has fallen because of the last few games they've played. But I still have them making the Super Bowl and facing the Saints in the championship.
So I have to ask, who's winning the South?
I still think it's going to be the Saints though. I just think you have both of those games on the Bucks. They have a pretty easy remaining schedule. But the Bucks do too. They got Atlanta twice and then Detroit. I mean, they're going to finish the season on a high note. And I think that's part of the reason why I have them going so far is because when you have a red hot team going into the playoffs, that's hard to stop. I mean, we saw the Titans last year. Titans coming into the season, playoffs, red hot, upset the Ravens. And then, I'm blanking on who they upset in the second round.
Patriots in the, yeah.
That's right. Patriots and then Ravens. That's right. But yeah, I mean, and I'm Patriots. I watched that game. I'm heartbroken over it. But yeah, but back to the Packers point, I want to touch on that one more time. The Patriots, they just remind me so much of the Patriots last year. Patriots beat up on all the bad teams, and then, they faced actual competition and they lost. I think that's what the Packers are kind of turning into be. I don't think their defense is good enough to be a championship team, especially with the phrase. I mean, it's true. Defense does win championships. And if the Packers don't have a good enough defense, then I don't know if their offense can take them far enough.
I totally respect it. I could see that. I'm a little nervous about Brady, and perhaps I'm being hypocritical with the recency bias. But I don't know. I maybe we're not giving the Rams enough credit too. They were my second pick, to be honest. And I left the Bucks off when I said that. I kind of wrote them off. Mm-hmm. But I could definitely see that.
No, I don't blame you. And honestly, I don't even know if you can say recency bias with Brady because he hasn't had like the greatest season, obviously. But still, it's just I'm a Patriots fan. I know Tom Brady. I know how good he is. I know how lethal he is in the playoffs. It's so hard for me to count him out. So yeah, thank you so much. Before we go though, I'm just going to rapid fire a few questions off the cuff, nothing crazy. So my first question is going to be fantasy wise, who is your biggest bust of the season? Who's the guy that you are regretting drafting?
So injuries aside, obviously Saquon Barkley doesn't count, but yeah, it's got to be Lamar Jackson in my eyes. It has to be.
Oh, okay.
So you drafted, and it mainly this is just an ADP thing. He's still been a QB1 on the long term, but he was just criminally overdrafted. And a lot of people, when you were in your drafts, what I was seeing is that Lamar and Mahomes were both going at that 20 to 21 turn. A team would load up with a McCaffrey or a Saquon. They would take a Mike Evans or a Julio if he fell at like the 19 range, and then they would grab their quarterback. And for Mahomes, he's not even returning that draft price. He's not that much better than your Kyler Murrays, your Russell Wilsons. Mm-hmm. He's not better than Kyler, though. He's just worse. And I think when you draft a guy that high, you have to expect that return. But I'm talking too long. I'm assuming this is rapid fire. With that being said, go ahead.
No, you're fine, dude. I completely respect it.
All good.
I will disagree though. I think Lamar has obviously been bad. I don't blame you with that. But another guy that was kind of right around his ADP, maybe a little bit further off, is Kenyon Drake. I mean, complete mess by a lot of people on Kenyon Drake. I mean, he just, for a guy who really hasn't, like in his entire career, really hasn't been a guy that you can rely on for consistent points. I don't know what this year was so different about thinking that, oh, he was going to be a consistent running back. He's kind of lived up to what he has been in his career. That's why I think Kenyon Drake is the most overrated. But look, I think Lamar Jackson's a very close second for me. He's definitely up there. But kind of just taking a complete 180 on that. Who was your biggest surprise of the year, biggest star of the season?
It's a good question. Gotta do a little thinking about that. I don't think Kyler Murray was necessarily a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does James Robinson count? I had no idea. I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I'll go with J-Rob. Yeah,
Yeah.
and note on him is that it's been incredible how this has happened. He is, I mean, even Derrick Henry, even McCaffrey, they have that Mike Davis, they have that Bonifan, they have some guy that comes in and takes some snaps. James Robinson is literally like the only running back in the Jaguars, and he's locked into 18 plus touches a game. So, and that came out of nowhere. So I'll go James Robinson.
Yeah, so actually, going back to like segment 2, whatever it was, where would you draft James Robinson next season? Because that's a burning question. I mean,
Great question.
What do you do with this guy?
It all depends on how the Jaguars draft. But I'm assuming, I don't know, if they ride on Minshew, if they draft a quarterback, who knows if he's going to keep that pace up? But I would say like mid-third round.
Yeah, I was thinking about mid-third round.
I have no reason to believe otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not? I mean, the guy is just, he's consistent.
And that's too low. That's too low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has he been an RB1 this year?
That's too low if we want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think he's RB4 on the year.
Yeah.
Incredible.
He's been nuts. Absolutely. And I've got 2 more questions. 2 more. Who is, in your eyes, not even just fantasy, just NFL, who is your best quarterback in the NFL?
Wow. Patrick Mahomes.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm not even going to analyze it. It's Mahomes.
And obviously, it comes down to 2, Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes. I think it's Patrick Mahomes too. It's so hard not to pick him. I think it's just too much recency bias revolving around Russell Wilson. And I honestly, if I'm being honest, I think it's just too many people are getting bored with picking Patrick Mahomes as the number 1. So they want a new choice and it's Russell Wilson. But I still think Mahomes is the best in the league. I mean, just watch last week. You got a minute 30 left and he just picked apart that Raiders defense, just like with ease. I know it's just the Raiders and it's a random Sunday night football game, but I just think it just adds more to just how good he is as a quarterback. He just does it with so much ease, you know, and a lot of the knock on him has been like, oh, well, he has great weapons. Well, I mean, Russell Wilson has arguably the best wide receiver duo in the league, so you can't really say that.
So let me ask this.
Okay.
Who wins more games, the Chiefs without Mahomes or the Seahawks without Russell Wilson?
Fantastic question.
We'll give them both, like, I don't know. We'll give them both Derek Carr.
Fantastic question. I still think the Chiefs win more games because they have the better defense and the better offensive line. I think that's what it comes down to. And for me, it just came down to like, what were the Chiefs like when they had Alex Smith? Because Alex Smith still had Tyreek Hill on that roster, still had Kareem Hunt there. I think Kelce was just emerging as a top 5 tight end in the NFL, and they were like a 10-6, borderline playoff team. Seahawks without Russell Wilson. I mean, they drafted Russell Wilson. I know it was the 3rd round, but they could have had him in a very early 1st round pick. They were not a good football team. I think the Chiefs are much better, and that is a big, knock on saying Patrick Mahomes just from a value standpoint. But I just think he provides too much for the Chiefs to say he's not the best in the NFL. So, lastly, though, last question of the podcast, it is going to be, who is the best defense in the league? Kind of something that goes a little bit unsung is just, the best defense. But who do you think the best defense in the NFL is?
I'm down to 3. I'm thinking Steelers. I'm thinking Colts. And I'm actually thinking the Rams. No knock to the Ravens. They're a close 4. I I think in terms of a complete defense, I'm going with the Steelers. I believe they are forcing the most turnovers. You were saying
Oh yeah.
earlier that they're the number one rated defense. Um, but the Colts kind of did come out of nowhere, and it's crazy that they're anchored by a guy like Darius Leonard, who's just so young with so much promise. Yeah, I'm going with the Steelers though. Just great in every way.
Yeah, again, I think it's kind of like the Patrick Mahomes pick. It's just hard not to pick the Steelers. I mean, they're so dominant, and I mean, again, they're the
Yeah.
number one overall defense in the league. And again, like it's no knock to the Rams. I think they are the second best in the NFL. It's hard not to pick Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. I mean, that's probably respectively the best two out of their own position. Probably Donald, maybe not Jalen Ramsey. I think he's still top 4 or 5 though. But yeah, I'd agree with the Steelers there. Well, again, that is going to wrap it up with this podcast, Ryan. I really appreciate you hopping on. I really appreciate that. Again, make sure to check out My Fantasy Guy on TikTok. Great content, fantastic content. Very helpful too. Very helpful. I've listened to a few of the things you've said. I've made a few of those trades, signed a few of those guys, and it has panned out. So, Ryan, thank you again so much for hopping on.
Really appreciate you having me, Michael. Best of luck. Happy almost Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. All right, have a great day.
Thank you.